Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the American Academy in Berlin. My name is Anna Ramich. I'm the Vice President and Chief of Staff here, and we're really happy to have you out tonight to our John Kluge lecture called "The Art and Agony of the Interview," featuring Lulu Garcia-Navarro, this semester's John W. Kluge Distinguished Visitor. This is a title that underscores the Academy's commitment to bringing voices of deep journalistic and cultural insight to Berlin. Lulu's work, over decades in multiple languages and contexts, has exemplified what it means to ask the questions that matter, even when doing so demands courage, curiosity, and discipline, or interviewing people that are smarter than you, as I just learned. Tonight, together with Michael Ebert, editor-in-chief of SZ Magazine, Lulu will discuss the art of the interview, the delicate balance between curiosity and preparation, empathy and persistence, offering a behind-the-scenes look at the craft of asking questions that matter. Lulu, we are honored to have you and your family here with us tonight, and this week, actually, in fact, in-house. And we're grateful to our trustee, Don Vieira, for putting us in contact with each other. And in case he's joining us remotely, thank you. I'll say a few words about the named distinguished visitorship. I will also introduce tonight's introducer, Michael, and then I will hand the stage over to them. The John W. Kluge Distinguished Visitorship is an annual program at the Academy which honors the legacy of the late John W. Kluge, a German-American entrepreneur, media mogul, and one of the founding benefactors of the American Academy in Berlin. This visitorship that bears his name invites figures like Lulu Garcia-Navarro to engage deeply with the city's intellectual life and to remind us that rigorous conversation is itself an art form. Previous Kluge distinguished visitors include Roger Cohen, Masha Gessen, Susan Glasser, Anthony Lewis, and Claudia Rankine, among others. Born in 1914 in Chemnitz, Kluge immigrated to Detroit with his mother and a German-American stepfather in 1922 when he was 8 years old. He served in U.S. military intelligence during the Second World War and then entered the television industry, eventually starting Metro Media, a conglomerate of TV and radio stations, and the nation's first major independent broadcasting entity, which he eventually sold to 20th Century Fox. He became one of the wealthiest Americans of the 20th century, but he devoted much of his later life to philanthropy, particularly in education, culture, and public service. In fact, in 1987, Forbes ranked him as the richest person in America, which is a title he lost a few years later to a man named Bill Gates. His gifts founded and sustained programs at Columbia University, the Library of Congress, where it's called the Kluge Center, and us, and for the purposes, that's the most important gift, among others. What distinguishes him wasn't just generosity, but his belief in intellectual exchange, that people from different fields, countries, and generations should be in dialogue, learning from one another, which is core to the mission of the American Academy. We hope and we try to do this exchange, this dialogue, and you could say that it's more important than ever, especially in very difficult times like today. So we continue to be extremely grateful to the John W. Kluge Foundation for making this program possible year after year. With that said, and as promised, I'm thrilled to introduce Michael Ebert, who will be in discussion on stage with Lulu in just a moment. He has been editor-in-chief of the Süddeutsche Zeitung magazine since 2013. He studied law in Munich, followed by editorial positions at Stern, and as editor-in-chief of Süddeutsche Zeitung's Jetzt magazine. In 2004, he helped to develop Neon magazine, of which he was editor-in-chief for 10 years. He's received numerous awards for his journalistic work over the years, including Journalist of the Year for Media Magazine in 2006. He frequently conducts interviews for SZ Magazine or the SZ, including with figures such as Woody Allen, Donatella Versace, who I learned was amazing, Prada CEO Patrizio Bertelli, Penelope Cruz, and Bruce Springsteen. He's the author of 2 novels published by Penguin. And despite his many aforementioned awards, it might be even more important to mention that he's written songs for German singer Herbert Grönemeyer, who many people call Germany's Bruce Springsteen. So maybe you can tell us a bit later on how the two. Oh, I didn't think that would be controversial. For those who don't know him, he's one of the most famous singers in Germany and apparently the best-selling recording artist in the country, according to the internet, beating out Helena Fischer even. So, Michael, we're very thrilled that you can join us here tonight. I would like to welcome Lulu and Michael to the stage in a moment where he'll introduce Lulu. The two of them will have a conversation, and then the audience will have an opportunity to ask them questions. If you're here with us at the Academy, please raise your hand and make sure that your question is indeed a question. And if you're with us via Vimeo, please type your question in the Q&A portion. So with that, please join us.
I have to say, now I want to ask him all about the songwriting. I'm in the unfamiliar position.
This is all about you.
Oh.
Good evening. My name is Michael Ebert. I'm the editor-in-chief of Süddeutsche Zeitung magazine. I have the pleasure of moderating this evening here at the very wonderful American Academy in Berlin. My guest is Lulu Garcia-Navarro, one of the most prominent journalists in the US and the host of the New York Times podcast, The Interview. I will not rattle down the very impressive list of awards you have won already, because we only have 35 minutes and we'll be through by then. Over the course of her career, she has worked for the BBC, for AP, and NPR. At the New York Times, Lulu and her colleague David Marchesi have been forming an unlikely but very interesting duo for the past 1.5 years. The two take turns interviewing contemporary figures on a weekly basis. And while David came to this excellent podcast from the world of writing, Lulu moved to the interview from the world of hard-hitting political video and audio reporting and commentary. Previously, she had spent many years in places most of us would do anything to avoid, covering virtually every crisis and war in the world. She's been shot at. She's been threatened with kidnapping and death. She's been woken up by rockets hitting her hotel. And her reporting from, the list is incomplete, Syria, Kosovo, Colombia, Afghanistan, Israel, Iraq, Mexico, and Libya raises two questions for me. First, what the hell made her choose the most dangerous path of our profession and pursue it for such a long time? And the second question is, what did this time do to her? And we'll get to that. Since 2017, the London native has been a US citizen, and she now reports for the New York Times from one of the world's biggest crisis regions, Washington, D.C. I'm extremely pleased to talk to her tonight about my favorite genre of journalism, the interview, but also about life and death, strangers and stars, and magic questions. We only have 35 minutes. Let's go. Please join me in welcoming Lulu Garcia-Navarro. Lulu, the original title of this evening was The Art of the Interview, and you insisted on changing it to The Art and Agony of the Interview, which of course makes it much more interesting and dramatic. However, it raises one question. Just how much do you hate what you're currently doing?
Some days very much. As I was flying over here, I had one of what I consider to be one of the hardest interviews that I've ever done with a very, very, very famous celebrity who I will not name. And there are moments where I felt like I was dying on stage. I hope I won't have this exact experience this evening, but it was like pulling teeth. It was so hard, to the point where at the end, my editor came and said, "Are you okay?" This is a very famous Hollywood celebrity, normally not what an editor says to you at the end of that interview. And so I think that there is sometimes agony to it, because it's two people. And I can control what I control, but I cannot control what they're going to do. And that can make it exciting, but sometimes it can make it awful.
Let's talk about the agony.
It's not surprising that this is where we'd start.
I can think of 7 absolutely agonizing archetypes of interviewees that interviewers like us have to deal with. There are probably more. There's the liar.
Yes.
There's the avoider.
Yes.
There's the hugger.
Oh, the hugger.
Yeah.
I haven't, no.
Like Sean Penn kind of hugged David Marchesi.
Yeah, people
you are so well prepared. I cannot believe it.
People don't do that for me, and this is now hurtful. I'm obviously not doing something right. Nobody hugs me.
There's the counterattacker.
Yes.
There are Mr. or Mrs. Closed Oyster.
Yes.
There's the salesman.
Yes.
There's the screen speaker. We'll come to him later. Let's start with the one type that we all know from talk shows, the avoider. I brought a short clip. I was told this takes about 30 seconds.
I will now do an interpretive dance of what this interview is about.
It's not one of the questions, but I'm really curious. How many pairs of glasses do you own?
I haven't settled on one yet.
Yeah. Let's go.
In the debate, you were asked to clarify if you believe Trump lost the 2020 election. Do you believe he lost the 2020 election?
I think that Donald Trump and I have both raised a number of issues with the 2020 election, but we're focused on the future. I think there's an obsession here with focusing on 2020. I'm much more worried about what happened after 2020, which is a wide open border, groceries that are unaffordable. And look,
Senator,
Lulu,
yes or no?
Okay.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Let me ask you a question. Is it okay that big technology companies censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, which independent analysis have said it cost Donald Trump millions of votes?
Senator Vance, I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Did big technology companies censor a story that independent studies have suggested would have cost Trump millions of votes?
Senator
I think that's the
Vance,
question.
I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020
And I've answered
election?
your question with another question. You answer my question and I'll answer yours.
I have asked this question repeatedly. It is something that is very important for the American people to know. There is no proof, legal or otherwise, that Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election.
You're repeating a slogan rather than engaging with what I'm saying, which is that when our own technology firms engage in industrial scale censorship, by the way, backed up by the federal government, in a way that independent studies suggest affect the votes, I'm worried about Americans who feel like there were problems in 2020. I'm not worried about this slogan that people throw. Well, every court case went this way. I'm talking about something very discrete, a problem of censorship in this country that I do think affected things in 2020. And more importantly, that led to Kamala Harris's governance, which has screwed this country up in a big way.
Senator, would you have certified the election in 2020? Yes or no?
I've said that I would have voted against certification because of the concern that I just raised. I think that when you have technology companies—
The answer is no.
When you have technology companies censoring Americans at a mass scale in a way that, again, independent studies have suggested affect the vote, I think that it's right to protest against that, to criticize that, and that's a totally reasonable thing.
So the answer is no. And the last question, will you support the election results this time and commit to a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, first of all, of course, we commit to a peaceful transfer of power. We are going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I, of course, believe that peaceful transfer of power is going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. But if there are problems, of course, in the same way that Democrats protested in 2004 and Donald Trump raised issues in 2020, we're going to make sure that this election counts, that every legal ballot is counted. We've filed almost 100 lawsuits at the RNC to try to ensure that every legal ballot has counted. I think you would maybe criticize that. We see that as an important effort to ensure election integrity, but certainly we're going to respect the results in 2024, and I feel very confident they're going to make Donald Trump the next president.
In the debate, you were asked to clarify if you believe Trump lost.
Let's just hear it again in a loop.
So this, of course, was an excerpt from your interview with then Senator J.D. Vance, aired in mid-October 2024, almost exactly a year ago. And what a year.
What a year.
Shortly before the U.S. presidential election. You probably knew you wouldn't get a straight answer to the question you were repeatedly asking. But you got something else. You got a 3-minute meme.
Yes.
Was that sufficient?
It made the Daily Show. It made everything.
Was
yes.
that sufficient? Was that the goal?
What is the goal in an interview like that? This is someone who is trying to be vice president of the United States. And at the risk of being really boring, I believe fundamentally in the role of a free press and the role of journalists to ask questions that the American people want to know. I always say I'm here as a representative of the people who cannot be in this chair. And so, this interview started, with a lot of questions about his own personal life, things that he hadn't really discussed, his marriage, etc. I knew that he had not answered this question, and I also knew that he hadn't been pressed on it, that journalists had asked it, he'd given some sort of equivocation, and they'd kind of moved on. I think understanding that he was sort of doing a nod and a wink there, right? Like, I'm not going to say that Donald Trump didn't lose the last election because I know that he lost the last election, but I can't say it because I'm his vice presidential candidate. And I just thought that was ridiculous. And so I was going to ask it over and over again until it was pretty clear that he was evading the answer. And I think one of the biggest frustrations that I see people have with journalists nowadays is when they don't press, when they don't follow up, and they don't ask the question again and again and again.
Well, this entire interview is a masterpiece in persistence on both sides, I have to say.
That is true.
Both of you are very good at what you do, to highly skilled professionals. Then there's, in one of his answers about immigration, J.D. Vance suddenly sharpens his tone and becomes what I call the screen speaker. So while answering your question, parts of it, he all of a sudden is no longer speaking to you, but to a completely different audience, his potential voters out there listening or watching. Tell me, how difficult was it to conduct this 1 hour interview emotionally and technically? There must have been tons of pressure.
Enormous amounts of pressure, enormous amounts of preparation. This was the only interview of any of the principals that was given to the New York Times, which is still the paper of record. Kamala Harris didn't do it. Neither did her VP, and President Trump didn't do it. And so J.D. Vance, nobody comes into an interview, especially a politician, doing it because they want to be friendly and nice and they want to, have a good time. They're doing it because they want to show something. And he was coming to the New York Times because he wanted to show that he would sit down with the New York Times when Kamala Harris would not. And so there was an enormous amount of pressure. And also, and I started the interview with this, when I talked to people who knew him at different periods in his life, I talked to all sorts of people, and everyone said, I don't know how the interview is going to go. It depends which kind of J.D. Vance you're going to get. Literally, everyone said that to me. He is a chameleon. He is known to be a chameleon. He's had many different periods in his life where he has been different things. He's been the author, right, that has been the darling of the liberal elite in America. He has been the senator who was still just like a Republican, now, then a MAGA stalwart. He's had these evolutions. And so I wasn't clear what it was that I was going to be getting into. That said, what I really knew was the service that I would be providing is trying to get as much information from him as I could. I mean, what do we do in interviews? We try to understand the people that we're interviewing. And yes, he has a lot of smoke screens and mirrors, but I think in that interview, you got a lot of information, at least I was told, that he hadn't divulged before, especially about his personal life and his family. But you're right. When things took a turn, was on immigration. And if I had to do it again, I would have done a different thing. Because you caught exactly the thing. He was no longer speaking to me. He was speaking to his potential voters. And he was messaging to them. And he wasn't having a conversation with me at all. And once that happens, it's a totally different dynamic because he's just messaging to other people. He's not engaging with me in a real way about the issues at hand. And so, you do what you can, but I do think that particular moment was a moment in which he was getting what he wanted out of that interview.
At the end of the podcast, or the interview, actually the podcast, you comment on some of J.D. Vance's statements that went more or less unchallenged in the interview. a part of the agony of interviews is the frustrating fact that lies are a very potent weapon in a live conversation, because if you don't immediately contradict them on the air, a false statement becomes a seemingly true statement.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the worst part of the broadcast interview?
That is one of the most challenging parts of the broadcast interview. I've done both live interviews where if you don't do it then, it just, there is no do-over. This was not a live interview, but it was pretty much live to tape, very little editing. The thing that we corrected was something that actually I didn't know enough to correct, which was, there was a moment in the interview where he had these text messages come out in the New York Times with a friend of his, where he had said he hates the police. And, this was in 2014. He basically said, I agree with you, the police are terrible. This is well before 2020 and all of that stuff. And I asked him, what was that about? And he tells this story about being in San Francisco and having something stolen from his wife's car and the police not being very helpful. And, it sounded at the time made up, but I did not have the tools to sort of know if that was true or not true. It ended up not being true. His friend said the timeline was completely not that timeline. But this is the thing that happens in those kinds of interviews. And I had a friend afterwards say to me, that story about his stuff getting stolen out of the car. I mean, I felt for him. I mean, I felt like that too. I mean, the police, man, when they don't help you when your times are down. I was like, oh my God. It's hard. It is hard to battle people deliberately coming on and not telling the truth. Even harder though, is people coming on thinking they're telling the truth and not telling the truth, because people often lie to themselves, right? And so that is something that is even harder sometimes to battle, I think. But with J.D. Vance, it was he definitely also got what he wanted out of that interview.
The format, the interview, has been available since April 27th, 2024. Among many, you spoke with Arundhati Roy, John Oliver, Reese Witherspoon. And I must say, you do an excellent job. It's really, I listened to most of them now over the past days. Quite a number of super interviews, and it's very entertaining to listen to you. And
see, this is a good interviewer, right? Because this is what he's doing here. He's saying something nice.
That's the hugger.
He's doing something nice, and now we're going to get the question. But
usually these famous people come to your show whenever they want to sell something. A new book, a movie, whatever. They are the archetype of the salesman or women.
Yes.
It's a trade-off, we all know. And the more famous these people are, the more experienced and skilled they usually are in withholding information. And it's a really hard job to get something out of them other than my new movie.
Yes.
You should go see it.
Yes.
Do you have a trick to establish a relationship with your interview partner? Do you have a magic question that you could
Can I give the backstory to this? He kept me up all night. He writes to me and says, I'm going to ask you this thing just so you have it in your head. And I'm like, I don't have a magic question. Should I have a magic question? What could the magic question be? He's got a magic question. Why don't I have a magic question?
You don't have a magic question because the people you're interviewing are so different.
It's that. And also what I do, someone comes in, the first thing I do is try and establish a rapport, try and just have a moment with them where I run them through what's going to happen. So we're going to sit down. This is a conversation in two parts. We're going to have an hour and a half now, and then half an hour on the other side. It's not live. If you need to take a break, please take a break. If you need water, just let us know. If there's something that you don't want to answer, and this is more for celebrities, I don't do this for politicians. If there's, obviously you don't have to answer it. Everything is on the record, blah, blah, blah. Give them the rules of the road. I find, to be honest, that settles them in. Like they're kind of like, okay, they understand how things are going to go. And, you'd be surprised, especially how many celebrities don't know. My colleague David Marchese interviewed Eddie Murphy, and they were talking, and David did a similar sort of thing, and Eddie's like, goes to his publicist, and says, what the fuck? I have to be on for an hour and a half talking? And David was like, oh no, this is not going to go well. So we do that a little bit of self-preservation. But I try, the tops are the hardest things. Do you find this to be true? The beginnings, how you start things are hard?
Yeah, it depends on how much time you have.
Depends on how much time you have. But for me, I find often that if it starts off in an interesting, like if we're in a good place, I'm not having to play catch up. If I feel the person is sitting, I will know, I have to tell you within a few seconds if the person is with me and present and wanting to engage, or if they're just, I'm going to have to work at it. And if I have to work at it, then I'm going to, with Reese Witherspoon, I spent, it's not there obviously because it was boring, I spent 10 minutes talking about Taylor Swift. I mean, it was interesting, fine. I mean, she, what was on her Instagram? Oh, I thought you were so happy for Taylor. How well do you know her? Isn't she getting married? It's so nice. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was never going to make it into the interview. But we needed to kind of settle in. And sometimes you just want to settle in with stuff that is not high stakes.
I have the great advantage of being German, so nobody expects me to be polite. Usually I come into the room, I sit down, and I ask my first question.
Really? I sometimes do, but sometimes I don't. Yeah, sometimes I do a little hand-holding. So what's your magic question?
Okay, first I'll show you. But
Okay.
I would, in an interview situation, I would never sit like this.
Okay.
Right? So.
Right. Of course. Oh, God. If I did this, yeah. Well, now everything's on camera, so I wouldn't be doing that. But go on. Yeah. So now I'm not feeling comfortable. So what are you going to tell me?
Lulu, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, no. That's the magic question?
Always works.
Oh,
because
gosh.
People have to engage, and they're being taken serious. They dive back into their own
I've used that
paths.
as enders, and it's never gone well. Maybe I should use it as a starter.
Yeah, you should try it. They feel seen.
Oh, but they always say, like, honey, it's going to be fine.
So you hung the question so high that now doesn't seem so good. But anyways, it works with me.
I'm going to use it.
I was asking for yours.
I'm going to use it.
In the few interviews that I find with you answering questions, you come across as a very open person. You talk about suffering from PTSD as a result of your missions in crisis areas, your difficulties in coping with the corona years. You reflect very wisely and very candidly on your career decisions. You mentioned the hardships of menopause. And then a wonderful quote appears from you.
He did his research, my goodness.
A wonderful quote from you is, "I've found kindness and honesty to be a very powerful combination." Now, Lulu, you're giving away a lot when you're being asked. Are you doing it all wrong when it comes to answering interview questions?
I don't think so. I think something that I did learn early on. So I don't know how, I'm assuming many of you are familiar with NPR. And at NPR, you have to go and ask people for money all the time. It is part of like the ethos of public media that you have dinners, you go and say, please, support public media. And a lot of and I was always doing that as a foreign correspondent. And I realized pretty early on that people just don't understand what we do and how we do it and what it means. And in fact, I would say that part of the crisis in journalism has been, a feeling of a lack of transparency and closeness between journalists and what we do and the people that we're serving. And so, I don't know, I found pretty early on that I don't have anything to be ashamed of. There's certain things that I hope won't ever come up into public light. I'm sure you all
Let's
have
see.
that. Let's see. Now we're getting somewhere. But I do think that it is important to, if I'm going to be asking people questions, it is important that I can also reveal things. I've had interviews where I've talked to addiction specialists and I've talked about my sister dying of addiction. And that has taken the conversation to a different level.
Absolutely.
Because they understand that I understand what they're talking about. That this isn't just me probing and asking for things in a kind of, puerile way. I'm asking because I'm curious, and often I'm asking because I have been affected by the very same things.
What made you choose reporting in war zones as a profession?
Now you're my mother.
Besides the fact that you're very good at it.
It was happenstance in the sense that I became I had my first internship at the Associated Press. I had a wonderful woman who I worked for, and she, one day, she was sort of at the end of her career at that point. She was AP radio. There was one of her for the entire world, and she was tired. And she said to me if I wanted to go cover the Kosovo War. And I was young and in my 20s, and I said yes, because I didn't know what I was getting into. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to cover that. And once I did it, I found it so compelling. I found it to be something that was just incredibly valuable, very mission driven. And also, it was during a period where, frankly, it was one war after another. It started in Kosovo. And then I went, I went to Colombia to cover Plan Colombia. There was the civil war there. And then I went to September 11th. And then I went to do the second Intifada. This was all just me on a plane, just following what was happening, and then ended up in Iraq with my husband for many years. No, we didn't end up divorced. I don't know how. And so it kept going. And then it became something that I did. It just became something that I knew how to do and that I did. And then you get used to it. That is your reality. You're comfortable in war zones. I was uncomfortable in real life and very comfortable in war zones.
But it hurt you badly.
It did. It did. It did. It breaks you to cover war. And I don't say this because journalists often have a hard time talking about this because they always feel that they're covering the conflict. And they don't want to take the spotlight on themselves because they feel that that's somehow, how can I be suffering if I'm watching children being blown apart and women losing their entire livelihoods and men being shot on the front line? How can I take any kind of time and moment for myself to understand the suffering? And I didn't realize how bad it was until all of a sudden, I had been covering these wars, and I found myself in Iraq. And this was at the very beginning of the Iraq War. And there was this big bombing that happened. And there was like 5 suicide bombers in the biggest festival for Shiite Muslims. It was their first big festival after the fall of Saddam. And they went into this, it was tightly pressed people, you couldn't move. And I said it was like meat grinders, it was like they had just destroyed everyone around them and there was chaos and fear, and we were running around and they were attacking Westerners, and it was really terrifying. And I remember after that, just not being able to move. I didn't know what it was. I just didn't know why I'd felt like that. I mean, it's obvious right now, but like at the time it wasn't discussed. We didn't know. There wasn't a culture of it. Your editor certainly didn't sort of say, hey, how you doing? That wasn't a thing. And so you just kind of got on with it. And then as the war went on in Iraq and it started to become a discussion for soldiers, it opened a door for journalists to talk about it and to talk about what they were going through. And unfortunately, that kind of life, it's a very unhealthy life. You you go out in the morning and you don't know if you're going to come back at the end of the day. And that's the truth of the matter. And you drink too much and you laugh too loud and you have inappropriate relationships with other people. And it's a lot to deal with. And there's nothing to anchor you. And it was devastating to my psyche, to my relationships. It was really, really hard. So, I speak about it openly then. I was one of the first journalists to talk about it. And I speak about it openly now because I believe that there's no shame in it, right? That it is something that happens to you if you are a feeling person. I think the thing that is wrong is if you don't suffer witnessing atrocities, witnessing horror, then I think you lose your humanity completely. So I think it's incredibly important to feel something. I just wish it hadn't, cost me as many years as it did, which it did.
With all that you know now, Sudan, Gaza, Ukraine, there are plenty of places where reporters are needed right now. Is there a little voice in your head whispering, you should go. You should go there.
There used to be, not anymore.
Not anymore?
Not anymore, because I'm in America. There's lots of guns in America. It's all good.
Oh. That's perfect. Life as a person with a Latin American family background in the US has often been difficult. Now it has become dangerous, especially since ICE agents are chasing people in the streets. You have called yourself openly an immigrant in 2018. You're always a proud Latina. Do you and your family feel safe in the US?
I think, yes. I think me and my family feel safe. I would never cloak myself in the fears, the very real fears of communities of color in America right now. What I will say is that in Washington, D.C. right now, it is very strange, and I thought I'd never experienced this. We are on the front lines of what is happening in the United States. Usually, D.C. has always been slightly protected from these things because it is the seat of American power, and most governments never saw it as a place that needed to be heavily interfered with in the way that it is at the moment. But now casually going shopping or dropping my child off at school, you will see raids of FBI and ICE, and you don't know exactly what's happening, or, people being dragged into cars and you don't know why. This is what you see in DC all the time now, in a way that has frozen the economy. Houses aren't being sold, despite what the president says, restaurants are not full. And so living in a place, what has been strange to me, the thing about covering wars in other countries is that I always knew that I could leave and that I could always come back to America. I always knew, as America has always been a refuge for people. And I always had the sense that, as bad as it got,
There's a safe place.
There's a safe place where things work. And, more or less. I would say credit card and a smile will get you a lot of things in America.
Plumbers.
But all of a sudden having this instability in the United States is incredibly jarring. And, for the Latino community, it is, I can't even express to you how terrifying it is. I dress the way I dress. I'm pale skinned. I drive a decent car. Like, I'm not afraid that ICE is going to grab me and pull me out of my car. But I know friends of mine who are afraid and carry their passports or their identity, documents, because they don't look like someone who wouldn't necessarily be a target for them. I have people that I know who are undocumented, who dress who disguise themselves to drive into Washington, D.C. now and other parts of the country where there's ICE enforcement, who are hiding their children, who are not going to, to get medical treatment. And you can have, I think, a good faith debate about whether those people should have been in the country to begin with and what should happen to them for sure. That's not what I'm describing. I'm not describing the merits of it. I'm describing the situation of fear that people now find themselves in. There have been different periods in America where that has been true. I would say that exponentially now that is ramped up.
Last two questions, because we're a little over time. Is the U.S. currently being led by a fascist government?
Ooh. I'm a journalist for the New York Times. And so and don't ask me the question 5 times because I'm not going to answer it.
Yes or no?
What I would say about this is this. I can't answer that question for lots of different reasons, which you know. But what I will say is that ever since I've been here, it's been really, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come out of America briefly. And the people that I've interacted with, journalists and other people, are all exceedingly worried about what's happening in the United States right now. They look at it and they are afraid of what is happening. And they ask the same question. Where is it going? What does it mean? What is the end game here? And what I would say is, I have covered authoritarian regimes all around the world. I have seen the collapse of democracy. And I would say, I'm not going to give a label to this administration, but I will say, and because we know it and are experiencing it, that there is a crisis of democracy in America right now. Where it goes, I don't know. And that crisis, by the way, is partially created by the government, but it's also being created by the people. There is a lack of faith in institutions and in the people who run them. In America right now, this is a moment of grave, grave turmoil where I don't know what happens on the other side. And part of that is because of what's happening at the top, but also part of that is what's happening at the bottom, to do with inequality, to do with all the changes that are happening in our societies right now, to do with our information ecosystems. There is a lot going on. And people feel overwhelmed and they feel afraid and they don't know who to turn to. And so that is incumbent on people like me and you and others to try and figure out what's going on.
Excellent answer. Last one. You are the daughter of a Cuban father and a mother who is Panamanian, a word I had to look up. Born in London, raised in Miami, a U.S. city where everyone around you spoke Spanish.
Everyone.
You've been traveling the world, not just reporting from, but living in many different countries. Part of your reporting has always been the kindness and the generosity of people towards you as a foreigner in this country. Can you explain xenophobia, the concept of being afraid of people who are different?
Can I explain it?
Yeah, can you explain it? The idea, do you know what?
I understand it so well. I think xenophobia is, one of the things that is disheartening about the period that we find ourselves in, but also not surprising, is that we've been here before in many places. I mean, my first assignment was in Kosovo, where people who, occupied the same land were at each other's throats. And so all the conflicts that I've covered, all of them, at their heart are conflicts about fear of the other and a desire to stake their ground and their reality. And so I'm not ever surprised by it. I'm always a little depressed by it, but I'm never surprised by it. Sorry.
But then again, you've experienced the opposite in everyday life as well.
And equally inspired by it and not surprised by it. People, I come from a politically divided family. after the 2016 election, my Trump supporting family, the Cuban side, and my, at that point, Hillary Clinton supporting family, the only thing they could agree on is that they hated me as a journalist. Like, that brought everybody together. There was great unanimity on that. But I've had to navigate those differences in my own family and in my own life. I mean, and the history of Cuba, our own, is of a people divided. I mean, my family were political refugees. And so, all these things are not unfamiliar. That said, the warning of history says that you have to be aware of what is happening and make sure that you stand up for the things that matter. And the only time is the moment that you're in. Later doesn't work. And what are those things that matter to you? To me, it's democracy. That matters to me. Journalism doesn't work outside of, the kind of journalism that I do doesn't work outside of a democracy. It just doesn't. So those are the things that matter to me. And those are the things that I'll fight for.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, back there.
I get really irritated when I hear suddenly American democracy is in a crisis. For some people, it's been hundreds of years of a crisis. And so when suddenly you say, it's falling apart, I mean, Jamel Bouy, your colleague, doesn't feel the urgency because he's lived with this situation that you're talking about. America's never been a democracy. It's been all sorts of things. It's been corrupt. I lived there. I'm an immigrant. I've flourished well in it, but it's incredibly irritating to hear you say how dangerous it is. It is dangerous, and how glad you are to be. Well, I tend to interpret people's words.
I was about to say, I'm not sure
I'm not
sure I said any of those things, but go on, please.
Yeah,
quite that way.
Well, I got the feeling that it's nice to be in Germany.
It is to have a discussion with people that are worried about what they see. I take your point.
Well, that's the other thing. They're suddenly worried about American democracy because American democracy isn't working for people who look like them.
Anna told me to interrupt. If the question is, I understand your point. Is there a question that you'd like to ask Lulu, or?
No, I take it. No, Jamaica is making, I think, a really important point, which is.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I want to. I know. I want to acknowledge it, and I want to acknowledge it because it's a point that has been made many times before, which is, of course.
Assholes like that man you're talking to, and I hope he isn't your husband. Why I never say anything. Sorry.
Who? Oh gosh.
Assholes that just said what that man said. And don't I have a question? In Jamaica, did you have a question? Is why I never say anything when people are talking, because his response to what I was saying was incredibly stupid.
I think he's just trying to be a moderator, but let me. I don't think he meant it that way, but let me be clear, which is this: if you are Black in America, American democracy has not worked for you. If you are if you are Indigenous, American democracy has not worked for you. And so there is no question that this idea of when we say democracy, what is democracy, right? What does that mean? And it's a very complicated discussion and idea. I simply mean it in the version that allows you to, as you say, flourish as you have, and that you are not penalized for your political or personal choices. But I take your point, Jamaica.
So do I, and I did not want to offend you. It was just important to me to stress what was said at the beginning of the debate, that I should ask.
You wanted to shut me down.
No, absolutely not. No, I was asking for a question. I did not want to shut you down. I'm sorry if it came out the way. Please.
You need a microphone or not?
Yeah, it's
Yes, you get one.
Lulu, can I ask you more as a journalist than an
Sure.
interviewer? One of the tenets of journalism is the veracity of truth.
Yes.
My question is, we're living in an era now with misinformation and disinformation, in which with each new version of AI, and I just saw the New York Times, an article, I believe it was this morning, about false videos from Gaza from yesterday. As a journalist, are you hopeful for
No.
the veracity of truth, or how do you deal with that, with this changing world that we live in?
So I think that's one of the things that we're facing. That technology has really exacerbated, the crisis that we're dealing with at the moment. When we think about the information ecosystems in which we live, right? And I use that word information ecosystems because we now all live in these little curated worlds. We used to call them bubbles, but they're not even that anymore. They're algorithmically sort of targeted to your attention, and so. The advent of AI, I have nothing smart to say because I am not by any means an expert in this, but it has been long foretold, right? We knew, I was doing stories about deep fakes in 2017 and 2018, and now the technology is finally here. And I don't know what the answer is, because what we're seeing right now is, again, Silicon Valley just sort of unleashing the genie and making us the experiment. Let's see how it works. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll all work out okay. And I've talked to tech CEOs, and I had hoped that they had learned from the rise of social media how problematic that is. But instead, what we're seeing is exactly the same thing. What it means for journalism and truth. We had hoped at the beginning of all of this that people were going to, because it was such a cacophony, right, of things out in the world, and we couldn't tell what was true and what wasn't true, that they were going to go to trusted brands, and they were going to cling to the things that were actually verified and true and important. And in fact, what's happened is the opposite. We've seen those trusted brands disintegrate almost in the face of the onslaught of disinformation, misinformation, and social media, and now AI. And I think, when I look at my daughter and she's 12, the way that she absorbs information is completely different than the way that I learned to absorb information. Her relationship with what is real and what is not real is completely different. Even when she says, oh, it's AI, it doesn't mean something bad to her, right? It's not something that's suspicious or she needs to be worried about. And so we're entering a new era, and I don't know where it goes. And I wish I did, or I'd be really rich. I think, the thing that I cling to, in fact, is the power of human creativity, the power of our collective desire for community, for events like this, for reading Jamaica Kincaid's amazing work, for helping us navigate what I fear is going to be an even more unsettling time. And I think the values of journalism remain the values of journalism. We try to tell the truth, we fact check it, we put it out into the world in various different ways to have people absorb it. And we hope that on the other side of that, people will want to, still be there to know it.
Please.
No microphone?
It's coming.
Coming.
At the beginning of the evening, when you were talking about the interview with J.D. Vance, you referred to a moment when he started to talk about immigration, and it was clear that he was not really interested in answering, but in speaking to his
Base.
So that's a very good example. Now, every day, I see situations where the government of the US, the highest leadership, is making policy in that way. What is going to be the best photo op? Whether it's calling 800 generals to Washington, whether it's going to the jail in El Salvador for a photo op, and so on and so on. So what impact does that have on society? What happens when this becomes the key element in even governing? I'm thinking a little bit about the show trials in the Soviet Union in the 1930s, but maybe that's a little bit too harsh.
We went straight to show trials. Okay. So this is what I'll say in my sort of analysis. It was very clear to me that once Trump put in his cabinet, where he sourced them from, right? They're all people, not all, but mostly people from the media or people who are very Dr. Oz, people who are familiar to a wide swath of Americans, Pete Hegseth, et cetera, et cetera. These are all people who are master communicators. They know how the message is the medium. And so it was really clear to me that the theater of the Trump administration was going to be central to what they did. If you think about the first Trump administration, that was like peanuts to what it is now. Before, there used to be this complaint in the media that Donald Trump was the sort of editorial director of the United States press corps, because with a tweet, with a comment, all of a sudden, that was the agenda for the day. This is now a completely different animal because of the way that we receive information, right? Now, this is about getting clips and going on TikTok, and it's finding people in all the spaces where people are now, and it's so diffuse and it's so difficult, and so the spectacle is really part of what he does and his administration has done, I think, very effectively. You can support or not support the president, but you cannot deny that he is a master communicator. If you think about what's just happened, a wonderful, event that has happened in the Middle East. I mean, thank God that war is over. And thank God the hostages have been released. And, all the wonderful things that have happened, he's at the center of that, right? I don't know another president who would have flown there immediately or would have had his family there, on Hostage Square. He understands that he is part of the story of America in every way that he can be. And so, you are grappling with that all the time, because there isn't a minute that he is not on television. Every day he has a press conference almost. He's signing an executive order. He's, there is something that he's saying something going to open Alcatraz. He's not, but that's a headline. He understands, and so does his administration. It's not just him, right? But he understands the lifeblood of the information cycles, and how the media, especially cable news, especially TikTok, especially Instagram, how they work. And they're constantly stimulated by more information. And so these visuals that are being put out, they do a lot of different things. They instill fear in some, they inspire others. But what they always do is keep your attention. And we live in the attention economy.
I have to go back there, and then the way back. Yes, lady with blonde hair, I think.
I actually just wanted to go back to the interview process. So you're in a podcast form now. You've done interviews over many types of arenas. I'm not from the industry, but I'm very curious about how the structure of podcasting has possibly changed the way that you give interviews, what you feel like you're allowed to ask, and if the rules have changed in a way that you think is pushing the interview forward or holding it back.
What do you mean by allowed to ask?
It's just a different structure, and you're under the heading of the New York Times, but podcasting is like such a broad idea.
Oh, I see.
So I didn't know if that it has opened up new ways of asking questions, or you feel like you have to stick to a certain type of, because you're also on camera.
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was about to say. The biggest thing that's changed it is that before you know, podcasting was you and a microphone and another person. It's very intimate. Sometimes I wouldn't even see the other person, so there wasn't even like, it was just like a voice in your ear. You know, you're kind of having a conversation. And then with the introduction of cameras, it's a very different thing. And it has fundamentally changed the way that we do it. It is the way that it is going now, simply because this is going to be a little boring and inside baseball, but the way that podcasts, you know, they grew exponentially, and now there are a million podcasts. Everyone has a podcast. And so, but there isn't a way for them to grow because of the platforms that they were on, Apple, Spotify. There's no way to, discoverability became a real problem. How do you discover a new podcast? It became really difficult. What YouTube allows is, you know, virality, right? Like you can go viral, you can do an interview and it can pick up, you know, people can find you in a way that they have not been able to find you on the other platforms. And so that's why you're seeing a huge push now into video, and YouTube in particular. It's not video, it's YouTube. You know, they're not doing it so that you can be on cable news. It's for YouTube. And so that has, I think, fundamentally changed it. And it changes it, I'll tell you, more than anything. First of all, I have to put on makeup, which sucks. But also when I'm interviewing celebrities in particular, especially female celebrities, which I do a lot, I mean, it's, you know, they have their whole stylist team there. They have like, you know, everyone is dolled up to the nines and now in front of cameras, and it does lend itself to a slightly less, you know, sort of more formal environment, as opposed to just two people kicking it, you know?
Do they stay in the room? All the other people? Like
No. That we always no. Although again, this difficult interview that I had, and again, this was difficult because of me. But the publicist like burst in halfway through because didn't like the way that the guest jacket was or something. So you know, it's a different medium. I'm not a TV person. I have TV people here who I'm sure would be like, oh my God, she's so lame. But I don't know what I'm doing. All of a sudden they were like sticking a camera in front of me, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'll do it. It's hard. Yeah. I have to keep my face neutral. That's my hardest thing.
Okay, right there. Interview, the microphone's coming.
Thanks. It was a wonderful interview. Now all I want to know is about the guest, the mystery guest. That was so difficult, but I won't ask that because I do have a more difficult question, I hope. You're a very courageous person. You've shown that in your reporting, and you've been very open with us tonight, and thank you. But there was one question that you kind of dodged, and that is the fascism question.
Oh.
So I want to come back to it. You don't have to answer it the way he asked it, but I want to ask you why it's such a third rail. You know, it's just a political term. It just describes a certain ideology that happened in the past. I mean, I study it, I read about it, I write about it, so it doesn't scare me. But
I don't think it
apparently
scares.
it's something that is, you know, we don't feel we can use to describe a political reality today. Why is that? And can you just talk a little bit about why does it shut down rather than open up? What's your explanation for why it's not widely used?
Oh, it's widely used. I'm not saying it's not widely used. I'm saying I'm not going to use it. Well, listen, I think, do you remember the big debate that was in the first Trump administration, like a lie? Could you call it a lie, or was it an untruth or mistruth or confusion, or like lots of different things? You know, words have power and meaning, and as you know, they're constantly being litigated. And journalists are in the business of being at the crucible of that litigation, I think. And this is again, I'm speaking personally for myself. No one has said I can't use this word or that word or another word. I find sometimes words in the midst of them being litigated, and they're very contentious, that it is unhelpful sometimes for me to sort of say, yes, this is what it is. Like that is, I think, for academics to discuss, for politicians to discuss. And And also, I would also say, like, I mean, do you think that America's in fascism right now? Would you say that that's what it is?
Sure. It's a very helpful framework to understand what's happening in America. And every item that you would put on a list of what is fascism is happening. And many of the things that you described here tonight are consistent with that.
Yeah. So, I guess.
I brought the definition.
No. He knows I do that a lot. I bring the definitions. Well, let me ask you this. Is it helpful for me to say that it is? Or I mean, what is it like? What is no, I mean, where I sit in the world, right? What is it helpful? And some of you said yes. Like some of you want me to say that. And I think others might say maybe it isn't. My news organization being among them.
You did use the word authoritarian, and that seems more compatible in a way.
I mean, this is hard stuff. Listen, I think no. I don't want to lie to this. This is at the crux of what we are here for, right? You can't pretend that you're standing up and discussing and defending things if you're not going to name the things that you're defending. I would say that in America right now, everything is weaponized. Every adjective and verb and noun. And if you're going to use it, you better be damn sure that you're using it correctly in the right context and with great effect. And that's what I would say. And so, at this particular moment, that is not a word that I personally am comfortable using in a public setting or in a private setting, actually, come to think of it. And I'm glad that you feel comfortable using it, but that's not a word that I feel comfortable using yet.
We'll talk over breakfast.
Okay, I have, how many more? 2? Okay, then please, right here, and then in the way back, I'll see you.
Hi, Lulu. I have a question about
fascism.
No. It's about the interview subjects and the people that are, I don't know who's choosing the people you're interviewing, but at a moment like this, which is so critical and serious, I'm just wondering, like, do you see value in terms of interviewing like these big time celebrities as compared to, like, for example, this interview you just did with Alex Padilla, which I just listened to today.
With who?
The senator.
Alex Padilla.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, he's not a celebrity exactly, but
yeah,
senator.
exactly. So you have a combination of politicians.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, do you see value in this side of it? Is it about the attention economy, and what kind of Trump administration officials would you like to be?
So they have not wanted to sit down with me, and I will say not just with me. They broadly have not sat down with the New York Times, and for their reasons, you'd have to ask them. They choose to either do short interviews on cable news or sit with friendly media. They haven't chosen to sit down for a robust, one-on-one interview, despite repeated requests. And I have my theories about that, but again, you would have to ask them as to why they don't want to do that. Now, in regards to celebrities, politics is downstream of culture. And that's something the Trump administration knows very, very well. I don't think that these things are necessarily as separate as we make them out to be. That one is frivolous and the other is somehow more elevated. They are different parts of the culture and the communities that we live in. And when I interview Arundhati Roy, I'm interviewing Arundhati Roy not only as an extraordinary writer and as a incredible person, but also as someone who is facing constraints in her own native India, and so would you say that was a cultural interview or a political interview? I think any good artist would tell you that all art is political. I think some would try to deny it, but I believe that all art is political. So I think that they serve a similar purpose. And sometimes I just want to have fun, right?
Last question in the way back there.
Thank you for your candor. It's very refreshing. As a scientist, I feel like the greater danger is the assault on factuality. And
Great.
It seems to me that as an interviewer with the technology you have at the New York Times, once you set out the ground rules for an interview, you could easily say, well, we're going to shut off the microphones, or we have the people behind your earphone to be able to say that's not factually true. But you have a platform and you have the technology to be able to advertise what the real problem is, which is factuality. And that's the loss that I think we're all facing.
I think... So the biggest challenge that I face as an interviewer is that every single person that comes in to sit with me wants to complain about the New York Times. And that is celebrities, and that is people that you think like, why do you have an opinion on this? But they all do. And they want to, and they get very upset by different coverage and all the different things. And I always tell people that I am not an avatar for the New York Times, and I certainly would never purport to be. I'm very proud at the organization that I work for. I proudly represent them when I can. And I think that they are an invaluable institution. I really do. And a flawed one, like all institutions, but a very valuable one. To your point about facts, we do the best we can, which is this. Nothing goes out that is factually incorrect in any interview. We have fact checkers. We take it out if it's not true, if we can't verify it. In the moment, if it's not true, I will try and combat it to the best of my ability. But there is also a tactical thing, which I think you understand, which is often in contentious interviews, people will want to drag you down rabbit holes. They want to tell you, they'll say this thing, and they'll try and get you to go down that road so that you don't go down this one. J.D. Vance was the perfect example. Let's talk about, Hunter Biden's laptop.
You answer my question.
Yeah, let's talk about Hunter Biden's laptop so that I don't have to answer the question that you've answered. And it's a very common rhetorical tactic. And so, when we're doing these interviewing, the agony is this, and I'll leave you with this thought, which is, it's really, really, really hard at all times to have an interesting, dynamic conversation with people who may come in who might want to deliberately mislead the audience. I'm not even saying mislead me, because ultimately I'm just there as a vector, but mislead the audience. And so we do our best, and I have to say, I don't think anything that has come out in any of my interviews has been factually incorrect, but it is always a risk in the times that we live in. So all we can do is apologize, correct it, and try and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Lulu Garcia-Navarro, thank you very much.